Hi Gary, this is Frances Toon. I wanted to share with you some of my remembrances of you that are so fond to Bill and me. First of all, I remember when sitting back in the chapel when you were called to be the first counselor in the bishopric with Colin Monk, that Colin looked like he was about to break out in laughter. Then I found out later that you had sung the song in the wrong key to throw him off. The second time I watched you up there with Bishop Monk, he again tried to hold back from laughing, Bishop did. And I found out later that you'd pulled up his pant leg and pulled the hair on his leg. The next remembrance I have of you is when you and Sherry would come over late at night, Bill would be in bed, and you would jump in bed with him. And Sherry and I sat on the sofa across from you. And then another remembrance I have of you is when you and Sherry would sing the Hawaiian love song, which was so beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Both of you had beautiful voices, and it was such a pleasure to hear that song. I love you, and I know Bill loved you. Take care. And happy birthday, dear friend.
So much fun to think about all the great memories with the great Gary Phair. He was an awesome priest quorum advisor and a great coach. With him, we won all area in basketball and dominated in all the sports that we undertook. I remember one time we were getting really excited about a basketball or a softball game, and I was sitting in the back of, I think, the Suburban that Brother Phair was driving, and I decided it would be appropriate to play Eye of the Tiger to get us all pumped up. And I just remember Brother Phair said, "Oh, no, we're not doing that. We're going to keep it classy." And it just I was a clueless kid, and I just remember that from many years ago, and I've always appreciated the influence of Brother Phair. He was steady. He was always encouraging and funny, and he was a stalwart in the gospel. And I obviously, his son Mike has been a great friend of mine for many years, and always slightly afraid of Mike, but always, felt a warm kinship with the Phair family. So, in fact, I think at some point, I was a home teacher to the Phair, so spent many times in your home. In fact, when I was in high school, my parents went away for a trip, and I stayed in the Phair's home for a couple nights. So, love you guys. Great to reconnect. Hope all's well.
The great Gary Phair. Happy birthday. This is Scott Driggs. I am super excited to record this video. I think the world of you and your family. You were a big part of my upbringing there in Mesa. And I still remember moving into the 6th grade and meeting Mike. He was the most popular kid in the school by far. And fortunately for me, we became best friends. And spending time in your home was wonderful. I still remember the great times there, all that I've learned from you and your family. You have always been a builder of people, so positive and fun, and also super talented. When I think of your family, of course, I think of the athletic prowess, but even more than that, I think about just how great all of you are, all the Phairs, and really love you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you have a great birthday. Hope I can run into you soon. And much love from the Driggs family.
Okay, let's see. Memory of Uncle Gary. Well, it's actually of Gary and Sherry. I remember going with you guys in your motorhome to Lagoon, which was super fun, and we were young, and it was like, oh my gosh, we're going to hang out. And we go to Lagoon, and we have all this fun. And then I remember at night sleeping in the motorhome with Gary and Sherry, walking around their G's and pinching each other's butts. And Okay, part two. And and then they climb in bed together, and he starts farting and pulling the covers over Sherry's head. It's like stories like that, Larry and Gary both. Just like, I mean, that was the entertainment for me as a kid, was those two and all their craziness. But of course, it's good craziness in a lot of ways. Me and my brothers get a bunch of our storytelling and humor and everything from being around all of that Phair fun. And Gary and Larry were the epitome of Phair fun.
One of my earliest memories of Gary was when I guess there was a time when he worked with my dad and would commute from Arizona. And so during the week, he would stay and needed a room. So he would stay in my room. And this bedroom had a loft where you'd have to climb over the bed, up this little ladder. And so I would sleep in the loft during the week, and he would sleep in the bed. And there were times if I had to get up, I had to be careful to kind of jump over him or not step on him. But the biggest thing I had to do was fall asleep before he did, because if he got to snoring, there was no way, even 8 feet above him in the air, I was ever going to get to sleep.
One of the things I love about Uncle Gary is that he's always happy to see me. Whenever he'd see me, hey, beautiful. I just love that. I think it's kind of a unique quality that, I don't know, he and his siblings share. One thing too is he is just a person who would show up. And whenever my son had a softball game, he would just show up to my son's softball game. I'm like, I barely wanted to be there. And there's Uncle Gary sitting there supporting my son in a softball game. I'm like, that just meant so much to me that he would do that. And he's just a person who I think quality time might be his love language. If he hadn't heard from us in a while, he would call my husband and just check in, just talk. And it would always be like a 2-minute phone call, just seeing how things are, how's it going. They would meet for lunch all the time. So, I think we miss those days, but we love you, Uncle Gary, and we wish you the happiest birthday. And I hope it's your best one yet.
I remember Dad and Uncle Gary trying to trick me to guess which of them was my dad. I remember it seems being very little, like probably at the house in Oregon, Grandma and Grandpa Phair's house. And at first it puzzled me, but then all of a sudden, if Gary turned his head, then I knew, because I could tell in profile that they were different. Anyway, what's so fun about Uncle Gary is how much he enjoyed being with my dad. And because he loved my dad so much, he loved us. I felt like he loved us like we were his own, and Aunt Sherry too. Anytime I saw Aunt Sherry, even if, okay, this is an Aunt Sherry story. Even if she was kind of frustrated with Deborah or Greg, she would turn to me like I was the sun and the moon and the stars. And I just knew how much she loved me, and Uncle Gary too. So I'm gonna stop now and then I'll send you one more. Being with Uncle Gary always meant fun. And at some point it always meant music. So some of my best memories are hearing Uncle Gary and Aunt Sherry singing together. I would look up later the songs that they sang to us. The Hawaiian Love Song, the Meow 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 song. Those became favorites of mine because they sang them together. And of course, ice in the shower and all that. That didn't happen unless we were with Uncle Gary, of course Uncle Ron and such, but it seems like especially Uncle Gary got my dad thinking about doing funny stuff. And one of the most special things in recent memory is, besides continuing to hear them sing together. Okay, one more thing before I go. So about that last memory, watching Uncle Gary and also Aunt Sherry talk to my dad, it was a great example for me of how to use humor and still enjoy my time with my dad, even though things had changed a little bit, but to show him respect and love for him through just enjoying his presence and joking around and trying to find the things that he loved, the things that would make him laugh. But of course, no one is as good as Uncle Gary in doing that. So Uncle Gary's crown is going to say humor, amongst other things. I love you, Uncle Gary. Special things in recent memory is, besides continuing to hear them sing together, is that after Dad had a series of mini strokes and affected short-term memory somewhat, and also mostly just affected his desire to be with everybody. Even if the family was gathered, sometimes Dad would find it easier, and I think because of the noise and because some confusion, he sometimes found it easier just to be in his bedroom, because then it was just easier. And of course that's fine. But then Gary would come, and he would come, and if I came and stayed for a week, often Uncle Gary and Aunt Sherry came every day. And Uncle Gary would sit by my dad and poke him and put spit on his glasses, or just say something really funny that would get my dad to laugh again and get him just a little more sort of enjoying life.
Okay, I'm going to try to make a video about my wonderful brother Gary. Those two guys have always cracked me up, like Lisa said, with their putting each other down with their humor. And I remember years ago they're trying to explain their position in the family, and Larry, of course, was born 18 minutes earlier, so he was the one who had the authority, and he was the lead man. Well, Gary says, look, let me explain something to you. He says, Larry was born first because he was an experiment, and therefore he's not the real twin, but therefore I am. I'm the one that got it, they got it perfect with me. And then Larry would retort with the fact that he was born first, and that the parents made the mistake of raising the afterbirth. So there's your twins for you. Gary was always known for his comebacks. And unfortunately, most of those comebacks just can't be told in this generation. It just can't be told at this time, because they were, mostly irreverent. But I have to tell you that I gut laugh even today when I think back on all of those memories and all those comebacks his whole life. I love to hang out with them, singing a quartet that just amazed me. When they were little kids, they were 7 years old. I was 5 years old. We used to go down to this movie theater, and they would have what they call the Hi-Ho Fun Show at the Tower Theater. They'd have an hour where the little kids would get up on the stage and perform. And they had what they called the Pepsi Prize, They had this song. They sung about the Pepsi-Cola, which we know we weren't supposed to drink in those days. It was against the church standards somehow in those days. Anyway, they got up and performed this duet together, and I just was amazed. They were my heroes my whole life with their musical ability. I got to tell you that Gary has a way with people, because he never spoke ill of people. He always encouraged people. And so I have one thing that I have to, no, I won't go there. After his stroke, though, he had trouble expressing himself, and I asked him a question. And whenever he'd ask him a question, he had this speech problem where he couldn't, after his stroke, he couldn't express himself. So when I asked the question, he said, I'm speechless. Now there's Gary in a nutshell. His humor was always there and is still there, and I just love the guy, love to be around him, and appreciate my older brothers and what the example they've set, most of the examples they set. Okay, thank you. Your turn.
Thanks to Tammy, who's helping me do this. I wanted to remember that, like Uncle Gary used to go to the softball games, he always came to Stephen's basketball games. It didn't matter if they were Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. He was always there, and he always stayed late to talk over the game with Steve. It was super. We could always count on him being there. Sometimes we picked him up when he wasn't feeling well. Yeah, that's a great memory for me. Second memory has to do with Del Taco. Whenever we went to lunch at Del Taco, no one drank all of his drink. And it was a race to the car to see who could throw the rest of their drink, of his drink, at the other person first. And unfortunately for Uncle Gary, I think Larry always got there first, and Gary ended up soaked in Diet Coke. And I do remember those battles, and I would get uptight. Don't you get that on my car? I just washed my car. That's it. That's all, folks.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. I guess I'm doing this, right? I don't know. But what I remember, I'm the baby. I don't have a lot of memories of my twin brothers. But I do remember Gary being my seminary teacher, and I thought, oh, no. So it was a very interesting year in seminary. I couldn't tell you whether I got a good grade or not. All I know is Gary was my seminary teacher, and I thought I was doomed. But I do remember later years, I wasn't around my twin brothers very much, but I was able to see them a little more. And Gary was very kind to me. I love you, Gary.
So I've been thinking of all my memories of Uncle Gary, which are many, and varied, and all positive. And one of the, and as I was thinking, I started to get a little self-conscious because a lot of them involve foul language and burps, and farts and things like that. But I was promised by Lisa that there was room for at least one more. So here we go. Uncle Gary lived with us for a while while they were transitioning up to Utah. Oh, this must have been 20 plus years. It was right when they moved back, right? And every night he'd come home late, and I was usually the only one up watching TV. And I would leave the chair behind me open because I knew that's where he would come, and he would sit down, and I'd just hang out on the beanbag. And when I knew he was coming home, so he came home and sat in the chair, and this is one of my favorite chairs. It was big and padded, and you could kind of sprawl out in it a little bit, and had this huge thick cushion in the bottom of it. And so, he would come and he would sit in it, and we would talk about his day and my day, mostly my day. He'd ask me all sorts of questions about how things were going. We'd talk sports and whatever else was kind of going. And then inevitably he'd go to bed. And the first time he got up to go to bed, I was really excited to reclaim my chair, right? So I jumped up with all sorts of enthusiasm and just threw myself into the chair, sat down with all sorts of force. And what came out of that cushion and up around me was an odor that I'll never forget. And I've always associate with Uncle Gary. He had, as we were chatting, he'd clearly been, farting on that cushion. And when I jumped in, everything that had been trapped hit me pretty good. But that's just one of the memories I have. And it's one of those memories that I actually love and cherish because, even though I had that funny moment, it draws me back to those moments that I had with him every night where we would chat about, my day and sports. And, there wasn't a lot of bandwidth in my family then for me to talk about my day or sports. And I remember Uncle Gary talking to me. So I think that last video got a little bit cut off, but I was just going to finish by saying that it was so nice to talk sports with Uncle Gary, and some of my memories I have are actually talking sports with Uncle Gary and my brother Joe's. And I know my brother Joe's really loved talking sports with him too. He was always up on everything, always knew what was happening, and always made us feel like $1,000,000. And the family gatherings we had coming together, Uncle Gary would always seek me out at some point in time. The conversation always started off with, "How's it going, brother?" And then from there, we would shoot off into whatever conversation was important to me. And I thought that was really cool. And it's something I've always cherished about the Phair side of our family, that just the warmth that everyone has and just the caring that people have. That's a really special thing that is pretty unique and that I love about my aunts and uncles on the Phair side.
Okay, I'm screening this through my daughter Valerie, so you can tell me if it's just too irreverent. But because of Seth's comments, it made me think about a moment in our past when we were teenagers. Gary and I were using the same bedroom, and so Gary gets out of the shower, bathtub in those days, I guess. He came into the room, and I'm lying on the bed there. There's a dresser right at the end of the bed, and he's, of course, doesn't have any clothes on, so he goes to the dresser. And it was just such a tempting moment there as he got into the drawer to get his underwear, I suppose, and that drawer happened to be right at the right spot. I have to explain this, his private areas. So I reached over. It was the most tempting thing that I couldn't resist. So I reached over with my toe and I slammed the drawer shut. And all of the uproar, all of the ado that happened after that is gone from my memory, but the moment of shock and surprise on his face was just the most incredible thing. And I'm sorry if there's little kids around, don't let them hear this. But those kinds of things happened often in our family, and we never had a moment that wasn't something going on that was amazing. Sorry to share this. If it's too irreverent, Valerie, don't pass it on. I love you guys, and the moments with Gary live on and live on.
So I don't know if I'm late for this whole story about Uncle Gary thing, but Uncle Gary has a very special place in our hearts because when my wife came to the United States and was here by herself, without family, without her father, without her mother, he would always approach to her, and in Spanish he would say, "Hola, mi niña bonita," and then he would sit down next to her, take some time, and have a conversation with her in Spanish, and that would make her feel loved, accepted, warm, and welcome. And he always had that love for my wife, and that's something that I'll never forget.
Wow, what a treat to be able to say just a few words about the great Gary Phair. I'm Brandon Fish, and Mandy, I thank you for the opportunity to share just a couple of words about this wonderful man. I have a lot of memories about Brother Phair. Of course, we moved to Mesa in the late 70s in first grade, and I became immediate friends with Kim, his daughter, and absolutely fell in love with their family in so many ways. And if I remember correctly, my parents, Leon and Connie Fish, became really good friends with Gary and Sherry in those early years of our time in Mesa. And I have so many memories because we spent a lot of time, vacations with the Phairs, traveling to Utah, going camping. But I'm just going to pick out a couple of memories that I distinctly remember, even at that early age. Of course, one of the very first things that I cherish is the great talent that brother and sister Phair had of singing. And I was so impressed at a young age with their talents, as I enjoy singing as well, that I had my parents ask them if they would sing at my baptism in 1981. And of course, they agreed to do that. And I just loved the feeling of that day and the memory of Gary and Sherry, brother and sister Phair, singing at my baptism. Kim and I became such good friends that I actually hung out quite a bit in their home over the years. And one really cool thing is, and I don't know if my brother Ryan left a memory, but I wanted to share a memory that he had, that he told me over the years back when he was in Young Men's. And of course, Gary was such an incredible young men advisor. I never had the opportunity to have him as an advisor, but I do remember Ryan telling a story of him taking all of the priests, or maybe they were teachers or probably priests, to 7-Eleven to get big gulps. And all the young men filled up their big gulps. They started drinking them. They sat around the store drinking their big gulps. And when Brother Phair went to pay for the big gulps, I think he only had a $50 bill or a $100 bill, and he gave that bill to the clerk. And I guess there was a sign that said, "We don't accept bills larger than $20." So as I remember the story, he said, "All right, boys, let's go, set your drinks down." They'd already basically been through their big gulps. They sat their drinks down and walked out. And I just thought that was really cool. A lot of people would have panicked and figured out, oh, what am I going to do? But he didn't care. He just thought, what the heck? They're not going to take my money, so off we go. So I thought that was a really funny story. I have a lot of memories of going camping with the Phairs. We'd go up towards Payson, fishing, camping as families, and really had a good time doing that. As I got a little older, one of my very favorite memories of Brother Phair was when I became a teenager, and of course went on dates on the weekends. The Phairs and my parents would go on a lot of couple dates. And many times I remember coming home probably later than I should have been from my dates. And I would walk in the house sometimes 1, 2 a.m. And sure enough, the Phairs were in our living room or family room. And you know how my mom and Sister Phair could talk forever. I would walk in, and oftentimes I'd see Gary over on the couch and my dad with their heads down, zonked out. They'd fallen asleep while my mom and Sister Phair just kept chatting and gabbing all night long. So I thought that was a really fun memory, and it happened quite often. I actually remember coming home many times and seeing that. Another quick story, of course, when I left on my mission, again, I had them sing at my farewell just because I loved their voices. And I love hearing them sing together, Brother and Sister Phair, as I know their family does, and just love that memory. And so I appreciated their willingness to do that. And I'll end with this. Actually, I will say, when they moved to Utah, I think it was after my senior year or just before, I don't exactly remember, but when they moved to Utah, I remember being so sad that they were going to leave. And it just broke my heart because I loved that family so much and continue to love them to this day. And so that was just a memory that I had of being sad. But probably my favorite memory among all of those is about 26 years ago, or actually 25 years ago, because this year I celebrate my 25th wedding anniversary. I was going to BYU. My parents were up here in Provo to see my sister perform in the Young Ambassadors, and I was going on a blind date for the first time with my wife. And I had gone to pick up my wife, Kristen, and we went to the Young Ambassadors to see my sister perform, and brother and sister Phair were there. And we went to the performance, and after, we actually went to Brick Oven. Like every famous blind date marriage story ends at Brick Oven, but while we were at Brick Oven, Brother Phair came up to me in Spanish, because we both spoke Spanish from our missions, and he started telling me in Spanish how beautiful my wife was. Well, what he didn't realize is that my wife was born in Spain and was fluent in Spanish and grew up here in Provo, but she quietly stood kind of off to my side and understood everything he said. And he was saying, "Ay, qué linda," how beautiful your wife. And you know how Gary could be a little rough around the edges sometimes. He may have said a couple of things in Spanish that I wouldn't say are off color, but were a little bit maybe embarrassing to have my wife here on a first date. And I just remember thinking, oh, when he finds out that she speaks Spanish, this is going to be hilarious. But anyway, I told him later that he spoke Spanish, and that she spoke Spanish, and he was even more excited, and then spoke to her in Spanish. But I just love the Phairs. I love Brother Phair, Sister Phair, and their family. It's been so fun over the last many years that we've lived here in Utah to run into them out to eat at the mall. Occasionally we will see them around town, and it's just been a real treat to not only share most of my life with them, but also to call them friends. And Brother Phair, you are one of a kind, and I will forever be grateful for our friendship and for your example in the gospel and raising a wonderful family. And we sure appreciate you, and the Fish family loves you a lot. So thank you, and God bless.
I don't know if this is working, but I'm going to give it a try. Ryan told me how to do it. So anyway, hi Gary, I'm making this for you, and I'm glad to be able to do it. I just want to talk to you just a minute and tell you how much I think of you and what great friends you've always been to Leon and I. And we were such good friends when we lived in Arizona, and you and Sherry were just about our first friends when we moved there, and then we did a lot together. So I have a lot of great memories of you. And one of the best is when you guys would show up at my house. Really, it was time for bed, but you'd show up at my house really late to visit, and you'd come in, and then you'd visit for just a minute, and then I had that great big pillow that I'd made. You'd get down on the floor, lay on that pillow, and then you'd go to sleep. Leon'd get up and go to bed. So there was just Sherry and I. We'd sit there and talk and laugh and visit, and I don't know, I think till maybe midnight or later, probably later, I'm not sure. But anyway, I always loved it when you guys would drop by. It kind of gave us like a shot in the arm to us. But I've missed that, in the years up here. But anyway, that was something fun to remember. And just the friendship, just how much fun both of you guys were, and what good friends you've always been to us, and how much I appreciate that, appreciate the friendship. And Gary, I loved your personality. You were just always so much fun, and just, loved to laugh and loved to joke with people, and say things that were just fun. And so I've missed that. I've missed that with you, not having those times. But anyway, I wish you the best. And I'm sorry I look so scary. I wasn't really going to do this right now, but I'm doing it. I'm trying to do it. So you probably won't even recognize me. I don't recognize myself. But anyway, love you, Gary. You take care of yourself. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Hello to the Phair family. Ryan Fish here. What an honor to be able to say a few words regarding one of my favorite all-time families, and namely Gary Phair. I'll tell you, the Fish family met the Phair family shortly after we moved to Mesa. I think we moved there in 1979 or 1980, and honestly, there's too many memories to share. I was thinking of a couple today. One of my favorite things that we would look forward to is when Gary and Sherry would come over on a Friday night or a Saturday night, and they would sit around and chat and talk and laugh. And Gary always liked to sleep on this huge pillow that we had, or sit on it. And you have Connie and Sherry just talking back and forth as only they could. And pretty soon, Gary would drift off to sleep, and then Leon would head to bed, and it seemed like that happened quite a bit. But I love that memory. I looked forward to those late night visits. Some of my other thoughts about the Phairs. I always looked up to Deb and Greg. They were kind of like big brother, big sister for me. Greg was my hero. He was probably on what I consider to be the best high school football team that I think Mesa, Arizona ever had. And anyway, they were always idols of mine. And of course, Mike, one of my dear friends, always thought he was just so cool, and just awesome memories. And then Kim was Brandon's age, and Pam was Shannon's age, and of course I remember the day vividly that Mandy was born, and it's hard to believe where the time has gone. Another memory real quick, Gary and Sherry singing In the Hollow of Thy Hand. I loved when they did that. It seemed like they did that for most missionary farewells, and just the way their voices blended was so awesome. I think my very favorite memory, and I'll give you a little warning, this might need to be edited. So Mandy, if you want to edit it, you probably want to cut it here. But Gary was so fun to be around. He coached our church basketball team. He even coached Mike and I in a I don't know, it was like 8th grade baseball. And one of the funniest memories I have of him is we were all being timed for a sprint from home base to first base, and the coach had a son, and the coach on the team, and he said, anybody who beats my son to first base starts. Well, when he would time each of us running, if it was his son, he'd go, on your marks, get set, go, and then he'd click the stopwatch, and of course his time was a little faster, and for the rest of us it was like, on your marks, get set, go. So anyway, Gary sees this going on. He goes over and grabs the stopwatch out of the coach's hand, and he brings Mike and I over to him, and he says, listen, I want you guys to kick his butt to first base. He goes, all I want to see is elbows and assholes when you're running down to first base. I have shared that story so many times, but Gary's devotion to his family, his affection towards Sherry was always such an example to me. My childhood growing up in Mesa truly would not have been the same without Gary Phair and the entire Phair family. So thank you for your friendship, for your examples, for all the fun years and memories. Love to you all.